Hey, welcome back. I've got another video for you, and this one here is the first of a series of faction-focused videos for Warhammer The Old World's core factions, specifically the 9 that will be in the game from day one with quote-unquote full support. And this one is going to start with the Empire of Man, who I've chosen for a couple of reasons, which I'll get into as we go through this, but essentially it comes down to that even though they're not the first army getting attention, they are still going to be a core faction in the lore. Not a core faction, but the main faction, I should say. Um, and I'm going to give my reasons why for that. I do think that we'll get lots of cool new lore for all the factions that they're focusing on in the initial 9 core ones. But I think at the end of the day, especially with the quote unquote again evil ones, the orcs, the beastmen, chaos, and depending how you look at it, tomb kings, they don't often in the lore get the same attention as the good guy races, Empire, Bretonia, High Elves, Dwarves, even some of the bad guy races like Dark Elves, because they're like the less human races. They're harder to, I think, write and and include as a central part of a plot because of their more bestial, monstrous nature. Whereas the Empire of Man, Bretonia, even the elves and the dwarves, they feel more human. I would even say the lizardmen feel more human, even though they're cold-blooded lizard people. They have like cities, they have like clear goals, they have obviously high level thinkers. Like they again have a more human feel than some of the others. So that's why some of these factions I think get more love in the lore side, and the Empire of Man it's pretty central. We'll see if that stays true, but I feel like it probably will just based on when this is set. And I think that Bretonia is only kind of surpassing them here, supplanting them, because of the fact that, it's going to be a marketing angle to get Bretonia out first, where they were one of the armies that disappeared, and people have been begging for them to come back. Now, these faction focuses, what I'm going to do with them is provide a bunch of slides where you can just read if you want to just kind of skip through this at your own pace. That's totally fine. It's why it's there. I will probably go a little bit past what's in here, but not by too much. And they're all going to kind of follow the same path that you'll see today. So who are they? I want to get right into this so I don't spend too much time talking before we start talking about this. That's one of the problems I'm having. It's just that, I'm not getting on task fast enough. So let's start. So the Empire of Man, it is probably the most powerful human faction in the Old World, specifically talking about the Old World. I mean, there is the whole world, and Cathay and other places exist. We don't know exactly how powerful they are, but I think there's a pretty good chance that Cathay is quite powerful based on their presence in Total War. But right now they're not in the game, so I think Empire is still at this point the most powerful faction, though for a couple of reasons I'll explain they are a little bit weaker than they could be. And they take up a huge amount of land, and it's a land that's like, it's a nation. It's central on the map. It's like got clear borders for the most part. And it's made up of 10 provinces, which also have, again, for the most part, clear borders. And what this means for your army is that even though they're just basically going to be a bunch of like uniform-looking soldiers, they could have all these different uniform colors, religious and cultural traditions. They're all a little bit different. Stirland, they're kind of folksy. They're a little more like bumpkin hillbilly types, and the Empire sort of sees them that way. Guys up in like Nordland and Ostland might be a little bit tougher. Same with Middenland, because they're 3 provinces that take a lot of the brunt of chaos invasions, like raiders from the Marauders and whatnot. Um, the Reichland area, they're a lot more refined and cultured. Like that's where the capital is, and they all have these different like feelings to them. They might even have different religions that they follow, even though they sort of have a shared general religion. and which I'm going to talk about right now. Their religion is the worship of Sigmar Heldenhammer, who's the founder of the empire. He was a warrior king. He united all the tribes who were sort of just like on their own, getting slowly destroyed by the orcs and beastmen and other monsters that roamed what was then the Not Empire that they lived in. And he brought them all together, and they just sort of like solidified their control. Um, and just like really just sort of got things like under control for humans so they could actually start like living without being constantly looking at the woods thinking something was going to run out and eat them. He also made an alliance with the dwarves. He was a great statesman. Most of the imperial emperors are the good ones, are statesmen, but he was a warrior king, and his deal with the with the dwarves was to go fight orcs. And so the empire that he founded, the dwarves, they came together. They fought the orcs. They destroyed this massive orc wall that was coming, and they rewarded him with Gal Miraz. And this is I believe called, I think it's dwarvish for like foe hammer. It's a fairly generic, I think, fantasy name outside of the dwarvish tongue. But what it is, this is important to why I think this is a core faction, the main faction. That's the Warhammer. You don't play Warhammer as this like abstract concept. You're playing Warhammer, and they're talking about this hammer right here. And in fact, if you play Empire, and they give us an Emperor model to field, he's going to have this option. At least one of them will, which I'll talk about in a minute. After that, they've got a government that's based around elected officials. Each province has an elector count. They also have a symbol of office in a sword that was given to them by the dwarves that they passed down. There are, of course, some limits to this democracy in the elections I'm talking about. Obviously, there's going to be, infighting. And right now in the lore, the Empire is actually in a civil war that's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years over who should be the real emperor, and it's called the period of the three emperors, because there were three emperors at any given time, or around three emperors. Some of them got murdered or died or whatever, because nobody could decide who to vote for officially. And yeah, they just had multiple emperors up until the end of the Great War against Chaos, which is really close to the period we're starting in. So I do think that will be an upcoming Empire supplement of some kind. Maybe even the first story we get about them, but it might not be exactly. I think they're going to focus on getting armies out and updated fully before we see any major lore updates. But who knows? We'll see. And yeah, very militaristic. Their whole nation is built around a military. It's very medieval, late medieval, early Renaissance timeline. So like, the people are citizens, there are the nobility, and you see kind of stuff you would see in European history, where like the oldest son is now going to be like the heir to the family fortune, if there is one, and further sons and daughters who can't be married for whatever reason, they get shipped off to join convents and the Sigmar religion, the Sigmarite religion, to become priests of some kind, or they might become a priest of Ulrich, a priest of Tal, things like that. And the ones who don't become the heir to the land, or the son or whatever sent to the priesthood, they tend to become soldiers of some kind. Family buys them just enough equipment to get them started, buys their commission as an officer, and sends them off. It's very much a system that stayed in Europe for hundreds of years. It's kind of what you did with kids in a rich family. They do the same thing, and the military is a big part of it because I think that it's one of the things that they see as a major component of their society, where they're always at threat, whether it's the things living inside their forests and mountains, like orcs and beastmen, whether it's the Chaos Raiders, the Marauders coming across the Sea of Claws, or, civil war, or whatever. The dwarves call up and say, we need help. They have to send an army. The Empire maintains a professional standing army. and they need professional officers to lead them. So it's this whole thing. And then on top of that, they have an engineering school, a series of them, but the main one's in Nuln. And when I say engineering, they make machines. They learn to build steam engines and cannons and guns and whatnot. They're quite advanced in that sense compared to most of the fantasy races in the Warhammer world. They've got the colleges of magic. They don't have it right now. That's a whole different thing in the lore. That they won't have the colleges of magic for some while. So we're not going to see like wizards like we used to have in Warhammer Fantasy for the Empire. We're going to have different wizards because they just don't exist. They also work really close with the dwarves throughout their history because of the bond they have with Sigmar. Dwarves tend to like them even if they don't think they're super reliable. They know that we can't trust you every time, but when it counts, we know we can trust humans usually. They maintain that friendship. That's where they learned engineering. The dwarves taught them. And yeah, it's just a very interesting society. And because it's called Warhammer and not, Peace Hammer, they are militaristic. So that's going to be part of the lore that you'll notice if you get into these guys. The timeline of the entire world is also based around the imperial calendar. Now, I don't mean that as in in the lore, the elves aren't using the imperial calendar, they have their own. The dwarves don't use the imperial calendar, but in the source books that we get, in the lore that we get, more often than not, even if it's presented in the timeline of that faction, that fantasy race, whether it's dwarves or lizardmen or whatever, we actually usually get the imperial calendar equivalent conversion so that we know where it fits into the overall history of the world. They're sort of used as the nation that, I guess, collects timeline information. Now, I don't think they actually know all this stuff. It's more for our benefit. But I have an old Skaven book just kind of on hand here. It's from 4th or 5th edition. It was printed in 96 anyways. And the Skaven timeline in the book is actually presented under the imperial calendar because it doesn't matter about the Skaven timeline because I feel like we wouldn't know what was going on in their timeline anyways. We need to know where this fits into the human timeline because that's the one that everybody uses. And I do think overall it's mostly just to keep it simple for us so we don't have to juggle 14 timelines. We just get one single one. And because their nation is also very scholarly, I think it fits into the lore that they collect this information and catalog it. And we'll even see some lore in the army books that is basically some sort of research paper or a diary of somebody basically from the Empire. We often see Empire writing wind up in other books, I think just to help keep the whole world feeling connected, that even in the Empire they know about what's going on to some extent in this other faction's land. And if you're concerned about this timeline, because we're just talking about this, and where it fits, historically compared to the last time we had Warhammer, it's 200 plus years before the end times. If you think your old Empire army is going to look out of place because it's been 200 years, clearly they can't have the same army. It won't look the same. It really does. Warhammer fashion is stagnant essentially across the factions. It's not common to see their faction uniforms and clothing and stuff sort of really change at all. As we look through the history, normally history is just a data point, but often we actually do have information, whether it's artwork or descriptions. And whenever clothing is kind of covered, whether it's in the picture or described, compared to 8th edition, the last timeline where it was 25 something imperial time, even 2300 it looks the same. As a good example of this, actually somebody recently uploaded a 4K upscale of the intro cinematic for this old video game called Mark of Chaos, which is actually set 1 year after the Great War against Chaos, and that's literally in the same decade or a decade or two maybe after Old World is beginning. And you would see that the warrior priests look like the same warrior priests we have from 8th edition, it looks like the same Empire troops we had from 8th edition and so on. Even the Chaos guys look the same. So if you have an Empire army, I wouldn't get too worried. And if you want to go buy some Empire models, again, I wouldn't get too worried. They're not going to release some brand new, you know, kit of Empire soldiers that are going to look so drastically different that they won't match. They've told us to use our old stuff. I think they know that it's better to give us new Empire models that look good but match instead of giving us old, new Empire models that look nothing like the old ones, because that'll just kind of piss people off. Now, what makes them unique? I want to talk about this for every army, and I think this picture really kind of summarizes what an Empire army should look like. And that is colorful, but also it looks like a real army. So you'll see that this army has black powder. We got guys with guns. We have cannons. There's a tank in there if you can't see that. It's kind of central north of the picture. And yeah, these guys have tanks. These guys have guns. They have cannons. They have rockets. And those serve and fight next to guys with swords, guys with halberds, next to knights. All kinds of stuff in this army that if you take out the griffin, if you take out the wizards, to an extent take out the tank, you basically have, not to an extent, like if you actually take out the tank, there's a whole bunch of things in here that doesn't matter that you leave them there and it's from a game called Warhammer Fantasy. It's just, it's like Renaissance era or like late medieval German soldiers. And I do think for some people, seeing that is going to be really, I think, a bonus, a plus. Now, some people are going to see this and go, "Bleh, that's boring. I want fantasy. Give me lizard people. Give me rat people, elves, dwarves, whatever." These are people. They are a regular-looking army, and I think that might be attractive to some people. Bretonnians are the same thing. And, yeah, the only difference between these guys and Bretonnia, to me, really, is that they have better infantry than the Bretonnians. Still very good cavalry, but just not as good as Bretonnian. And then they also have a lot of shooting. Bretonnians have very limited shooting. A few guys with bows and like a trebuchet. So it sort of just depends which version of historical warfare you want to see on the tabletop. Literal medieval or like tail end of medieval, early Renaissance. Just personal preference on historical. So, yeah, I kind of went out of order here. So if you're trying to like follow along on what I say on the side, I did skip a section, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's all going to get covered. Now, in terms of what makes them unique in play style, past the how they look, it's just going to be down to how their infantry work. The knights work relatively the same as knights in any army. The shooting works basically the same as shooting in any army, and so on. But the infantry, they really do rely on buffs and synergy in the way you build your list. So the infantry are kind of mediocre. They're not bad, they're not great. They're just standard humans like you would see in any fantasy setting. Humans are never the best, and they're never the worst. And these guys rely on real strategy and tactics. Like I did say, this is a very militaristic society. So for one, those are, as I said, professional soldiers. They're not just guys that like train, once or twice a month on the weekends. These guys are soldiers every day, all day. And it shows in the way you play them. They, as a block of troops, are not that great. Sorry, but the what's special about them is detachments. So a big block of guys in most armies is how you buy things. You buy 20 Chaos Warriors, you buy 20 Elves, you buy 20 Bretonnian infantry. But in the Empire, you buy 20 infantry, and then you can buy up to 2 units of 5 to 10 detachment models. These guys are the same type of soldier with maybe different weapons, but they're small units that come with the big one, and their whole job is to provide shooting and combat support. So when the parent gets into a fight, some of them might shoot the enemy first, and other ones might join the combat by charging in. So it completely changes the way you play Warhammer. Most armies, basically every army other than these guys, you move a block of soldiers forward, and they either have made a charge, or they move up and stop, and they wait to take a charge, or they wait to charge the next turn. That's how the infantry work. That's how the knights work. In the Empire, um, they're a relatively static army as a result. You'll attach those extra units, and then they'll sort of like get into position to take a charge, so that their handgunners or crossbows can shoot the enemy as they're charging, and then the swordsmen maybe that are attached to your halberdiers can charge the flank. This basically lets you soften up the enemy by maybe breaking a rank, which is part of how you win combats. At least it used to be, but I bet it's still going to be there to some extent. And then also they charge in, which could actually break ranks and further increase your chances of outright winning, no matter how many losses you take, because the enemy just won't have enough bonuses that you're going to naturally have to sort of offset any losses you take above what they take. And I think that's a really important thing, that if you're looking for an army, to understand that this is the one army that's going to feel like an actual army, where there is some level of like combined arms combat, where there's units that are working together and orders are, in your head, but on the tabletop you're seeing orders being sent out to react to what's happening. Most armies don't react that way. They just react by either, standing to take the fight or running away. These guys have like, those little baby units that are helping out. Um, Another thing that really makes them stand out is that most armies have good characters to some extent that provide a benefit to being there, whether it's leadership or by giving a really good combat character who can soften up enemy units during a combat so that. Oh, my display turned off. I apologize. I need to move my mouse a little bit more. Um, yeah, they can get benefits that most armies don't, because again, like the soldiers, the characters aren't that great. They're not the best fighters. They're not the best mages. They're not the best at really anything in most cases. They can still be okay, but you're not taking a character to kill other characters. Usually, you're taking him because he lets you take 3 dice leadership rolls. Do we know if that's still going to be there? No, but I do think the idea that characters are going to provide buffs to the units will be there. Um, so not only did Empire characters provide higher leadership, some of them allowed you to roll an extra die, making it more likely that they wouldn't run away when they lost a fight. Or another type might give you a reroll to hit in combat. Another one might give you like magic resistance. There were a variety of buffs that you could get from your units, into your units, I mean, from the characters. And those would actually bounce over to the detachments. So synergy and really just understanding how the army works so that you can buff it properly is a big part of the Empire. Um, when I did mention their cavalry, it's some of the heaviest in the game. You've got these knights that have probably the best armor in the game outside of one or two others with comparable armor at 1 plus. And even though they don't have some of the fancy tricks like Bretonnian knights do with their lance formation, they still hit hard. And because of that 1 plus save, you need to start actually having some serious armor penetration to make them have a save worse than 2 plus. And that means that they're going to stick around a long time. They wind up being pretty good on the charge, but they wind up being especially good holding an enemy in place, even though they're expensive for this. They do last pretty well. And yeah, this last part I'm going to mention, it's not something that makes them unique for players who are starting out with them. I think this is just an important, unique thing that is going to be something to keep an eye on, because I don't know how many armies are going to deal with this. But other than seeing a major retcon to the lore, we are not going to have the colleges of magic. They were not founded at this point, meaning that our Empire mages might know fire spells, they might know light spells, but they're not going to be well trained like the Empire battle wizards of 6th and 8th and whatever editions, that there were before. These guys are going to be, court sorcerers and stuff, and they're going to have very different spells, I think. We just need to keep that in mind when we play these guys. That, if you like Magic, I don't know if this is going to be the army for you. I think that Magic is just a part of the army that we have to consider when playing, but very seldom rely on, and especially true probably this edition. Units. We don't know what the units are going to look like. We don't know what army lists are going to look like. I can make guesses. Many people have. I do think, though, the best way to do this is to break it down into characters, core, special, and rare. That's how we used to break down our armies. And I think that's going to be essentially the same here. We're still going to see basically the same type of unit breakdown because I just can't see how this game would work with a Warhammer 40k style, take 3 of this and 3 of that and build a list like that because that's a very competitive focused way to play. I think this is going to be much more like Middle Earth, like Horus Heresy, where it's not built around tournament play. It's not built around competitive play. It's built around narrative play and casual play. And it's not just going to be like those are facets of how to play the game that have some level of respect in the rule design. I think that's going to be just how you play the game. And like we used to have, tournaments will exist, but won't be as codified as 40k tournaments have become. And that's why I think that we're going to have the same sort of breakdowns for units, and we're going to have very similar limitations like we used to have because this is not a game that plays well with super powerful characters. If you want to see what 5th edition was like in Fantasy, look that up. They called it Hero Hammer for a reason. And some people may like that. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think it's very different from what people expect and think about when they think of Warhammer Fantasy right now in 2023. And everything I talk about from here on out is going to be very general overviews, nothing in depth, no stats, no special rules for the most part. And it's all going to be based around the 8th edition books that were available. And this is just me talking about what was available and what is probably still going to be available. I'll point out the couple of things I think might disappear and explain why I think that. So, character choices. They come as both Lord and Hero. The only difference is Lords are slightly better. The stats are 1 or 2 points better. They cost more points, and they're basically better at the thing that class does. Generals and Captains. The General is a better version of the Captain, essentially, so he costs more. These are the main combat leaders, although, truth be told, I should probably actually say these are the main leadership characters. They do combat. You can give them lots of weapon options, and you can make them pretty good at fighting. But they will never go toe-to-toe with an Orc War Boss. They'll never go toe-to-toe with a Chaos Champion. Because they're just people. A slightly better person is still just a slightly better person, and a monster man is going to be a monster man. So don't take these guys thinking that they're going to be clearing out enemy units, because it's just not going to happen. They're also definitely not going to be assassinating enemy characters across the board in decisive combat. What they are good at, though, is making your units better. As I said, you get extra dice for leadership is how it used to work. I don't know if that'll still be a thing, but I think that it's possible that for the sake of simplicity, we might see a lot of rules like that return. It limits how much they have to create, and it really wasn't a seriously overpowered rule, I don't think. And it had a pretty fluffy feel to it, because basically you roll an extra die. You roll an extra die, and you pick the 2 lowest, and that helps you stay in combat. Like, they're getting good orders and good discipline to stay. Sorry, my throat's kind of dry tonight. The weather is weird up here right now where I'm at. Like, it's cold, and then it's warm-ish, and then it's damp, and I don't know. I hate this time of year. It just can't make up its mind. It just be winter or not, basically, is what I want. Um, and when you take generals and captains, I think the real thing you need to consider is basically why are you taking them? Again, they have good, decent bonuses for your troops, especially your kind of not great troops. But do you want them mounted? And if you want them mounted, is it like on a horse? Do you want them mounted on a Pegasus? Do you want them mounted on a Griffin? These guys can have some decent mounts. They can also, if they're a captain, carry a battle standard bearer. Another very useful tool for the Empire. Most armies use them, but the Empire, with their kind of mediocre infantry, again, a reroll for your leadership is really, really nice. If you're saving on a 6 plus because you lost by a couple of points, it's a lot nicer to have a reroll on that, you know, seeing as the average on 2 dice is 7. So, BSBs are something you'll see a lot of in Empire armies, I assume, if they're still in the game. Next, we have Archlectors and Warrior Priests. Mainly, we're talking Warrior Priests of Sigmar, but really there are other kinds, and essentially you can swap them in and out at will. It really doesn't matter. I use Wolf Priests of Ulrich in my army because I am an army of Middenland, and my Sigmar guys are just sort of there and occasionally come out. But mostly I use the ones I like because I like those models. Um, what they do in the game is provide some mediocre benefits to the troops in terms of buffing them through leadership. Probably they won't be much of a use for that. They might bump up your unit by like 1 point. What they really are there for is to give that unit hatred for a reroll to hit. Um, that's a really good bonus to have. They also provided a dispel dice in past editions so that you could more easily dispel enemy powers. They could do prayers, which were types of spells. And if you took the Archlector, the Lord level, he could actually take the War Altar of Sigmar. It's a magic chariot. It can buff some stuff nearby, and it's a pretty decent little chariot to charge into combat alongside something else, just, for the extra hits and whatnot. Then we got Wizard Lords and Battle Mages. We're not going to see Wizard Lords and Battle Mages, not the way they were. Again, no Colleges of Magic means no Battle Wizards, no Wizard Lords. It just doesn't happen. We're not going to have a Balthazar Gelt type character because Balthazar Gelt is the patriarch of the schools. He's the boss of the wizards. Um, he's Dumbledore with a metal head, and we can't have him because there is no colleges for someone to be the head of. Maybe in a book in the future that'll be a thing, but for now, expect things like hedge wizards and court sorcerers, like I mentioned before. They are going to have magic. They are not going to have the same spells we're used to, but it's okay. I think that they can still do some cool stuff with it. And at the end of the day, I never felt the Empire was an overly magical faction, anyways. Our real benefit was just having all of the core lores, which most armies did not have access to. So even if that changes, I don't think it was ever a faction that, really relied on magic in most games. You relied on good strategy with your soldiers and a solid list, I felt, more than that. We do have a Grandmaster. He's Lord level only. There's no hero level. And he's the actual combat leader. Like I said, the generals and captains, I wrote they're your main combat leaders, but it's not really true. For this guy, it is. He's a decent general, but he also is a pretty good fighter, and when you give him the right weapons, he's quite good in combat, especially since he essentially naturally comes with a 1 plus armor save. All you got to do is get him an okay ward save and a decent weapon to really smash enemy characters with. His stats are slightly better again than the generals. And then he's on top of a horse, and he's attached to a unit of knights. So his unit does tend to hit very, very hard. He also just tends to be the most expensive character we have outside of special characters. Next, we have the Master Engineer. This guy, he is an interesting one. He's not good in combat, like a mage. He's not good at fighting. He doesn't have any magic powers or other types of powers that he really offers. He doesn't offer any buffs usually to your units if he joins them. What he does is he provides rerolls and benefits to your artillery train, your cannons, your mortars, your hellblasters, your things like that. The I can't think of what the rockets are called. Storm something. Um, yeah, he provides rerolls and stuff to make sure they basically don't blow up and to help them hit. So he is an interesting character. I very seldom take one, but if I do take a lot of artillery, he's a great model to have because he makes it more reliable. And I do think that that'll still have a place in the game. Now the next guy, I don't know if he has a place in the game. I think like the wizard lords and battle mages, he might be gone. Except I think he might be just outright gone. The witch hunter was a character that was there to basically hunt down wizards and demons and vampires and give you bonuses against a type of um, creature that you often were like at a disadvantage against. The undead, the demonic, and the wizards. Again, like I said, they could get rerolls against them. They could also pick a unit and mark it for death. Not a unit, sorry, but a model. And they could go after that character and shoot it with pistols and kill it in one shot, or charge into combat with it and get rerolls to hit and whatnot. And they were okay for that. And with the right gear, they were a really good glass cannon. They could show up, do a massive amount of damage, especially if Van Horseman's Speculum is in this game. It's a magic item that lets you swap stats with the enemy. And like a human, his stats are pretty mediocre. So when he swaps with a Chaos Lord, when he swaps with an Orc or a Vampire, he becomes beastly. He has amazing stats at that point, and they get his crappy stats. But then also he has all of his bonuses against these things to help him kill them better. So the Witch Hunter was super dangerous. I really hope he's in the game. I just feel like he might not make it. His shelf life was pretty short to begin with, and I don't know. I don't know if that model is going to get brought back. We'll see. I hope so, but I don't know. Core choices. This one's going to be a lot faster because for the most part they're all the same. There's multiple kinds, but they come in three varieties. State troopers. These are the basic soldiers. They're the guys with the nice uniforms that come in nice little pretty ranks. They have swords, they have halberds, spears. If they're fighters, and if they're not, if they're ranged units, they have handguns, which are muskets. They have bows and they have crossbows. And these are our parent units and most of our detachment units. So you can pick one of these units and give them some little buddies to come with them, or you can use them as the buddies that go with somebody else. And it's really just up to you how you use them. They are really fun. They look really nice when they're painted up. And they're again they're a staple in your army. Free Company Militia. This is another one that I don't know. I'm worried they won't make it back. I hope I'm wrong because the Free Company's cool. These are the only guys we have with two-hand weapons, meaning they get extra attacks. They have bad armor. They have pretty mediocre stats, but they're really good at coming into something that doesn't have a lot of armor or toughness itself, and just doing a lot of attacks to help you get them whittled down quicker. They also can act as detachments, although they cannot be parent companies. And finally, for the core, we have knightly orders. Most armies don't have their heavy cavalry under core outside of Bretonia. And even then, their best stuff is not core, it's their average knights. These are basically the best knights Empire has because of how many you can take for the points with the stats and the equipment they have. There's better knights in other slots for the Empire, specifically the next one, but they either cost more per model by like a lot, or they provide a very specific benefit, which I'll get into. So yeah, they come in a couple of varieties. Either they come as regular knights, which are still very heavy knights, or they come as inner circle, where they get slightly better stats, cost a little more, and that's about it. They're just a little better for a little more. And they come with either lances and shields or great weapons. Great weapons in this game, at least before, would strike last, meaning if you swing a great weapon at somebody, they're going to get to attack with their regular sword or spear before you do, and as long as you survive the attack, you can hit them for high strength damage. But if they get lucky, they might kill you before you get your swing in. So the Empire Knights with the great weapons can be risky because their armor save is actually a little bit worse, where they lack a shield. But turn after turn, they provide more value because their damage output is higher, and they still have a good armor save of 2+. They just hit 3+ a lot easier than the Lance Knights do. Moving into special, this is where the really cool stuff starts coming in. Before, up to there, you were just taking stuff because you had to. You need characters, you need core. Those were mandatory. Special choices are not mandatory, and they are the best ones because they're fun. Great swords. State troopers with two-handed swords. Great swords. Just like those knights I mentioned. These guys are also detachment options. Or, sorry, cannot be detachments, but they can take detachments. A good way I like to run them is with handgunners or crossbows, just to soften up the enemy ranks a little bit. Although taking some swordsmen to help them with a flank charge is also a nice way to use them. Very good guys. Oh, and they're stubborn. What that means in the game is that you don't take modifiers for your leadership checks. It's very cool. And these guys overall are very, very good. They just are elite, so they're a little more expensive. Then we got Demigryph Knights. There's a picture of one on the side. It's a griffin without wings. It rides in like a monstrous horse. The rider's okay. He's inner circle, those better knights I mentioned. But also the monster's way better. He's got more attacks. He's got better consistent strength. And he can also do like a stomp attack. I don't know if that'll still be a thing, but basically he got an extra hit at the end of each combat. Very good models. Very cool models. I think this is something that most people are going to want to have in their army. Then we have the Reiksguard Knights. These are just regular inner circle knights that are also stubborn, but they are special in the sense that they're the Emperor's personal guard, essentially. They are just basically slightly better inner circle. Huntsmen, these are like the archers I mentioned before. They're slightly different. They had a way to become better at killing monsters. There was a special character that buffed them. I don't know if he'll be in the game. I don't know. I feel like these guys won't make it because they're not really necessary. They're just an extra special slot that really isn't needed. It's just a choice that doesn't really make sense, I guess. It had its place, it had its uses, but there's better ways to spend your special points where you have a maximum 50% of your army that can go into this area. Which sounds like a lot until you realize like demigryphs are like almost 60 points a model. Great swords are like I think 11 points a model. So if you take 20, you're like way over 200 points already. Reiksguard Knights were like 300 for 10. Like you get what I'm saying. Huntsmen are not a great choice in many ways. They're just guys with bows, which are not your best weapon. Maybe if they come back as an option with handguns, we could talk about these guys. But I think as they stand, they don't make sense, and they probably won't be in the list because really, there's no such thing as a huntsman kit. It was just archers. Next, you got pistoliers and outriders. These are young nobles. They have spent the money to have a flashy set of like pistols or like some sort of like mechanical repeating handgun thing, and they're a unit that you often will use sacrificially. So you have to be aware when you're spending points on them that you know most games the goal is for them to do something incredibly dangerous and possibly die. Maybe that'll be different in this edition. They do have the shoot and flee option being added for a charge reaction. So maybe that'll help them become more valuable where they can shoot and then run away. But it is still a risk. There are better ways, I think, to do the same job of march blocking or charge redirection. It's just that these guys also happen to be quite fast. So as long as they don't get shot, these guys are okay. But yeah, again, not a unit I use a lot of. They'll be in the game. I don't use them very often, even though I have some. Next, we got cannons and mortars. These are the first two war machines. Cannons, Basically, what you have this for is if the other guy brings a monster, if he brings a big unit of knights, you shoot a cannonball at the monster, you shoot a cannonball at the knights, and you either do a lot of wounds to the monster when you hit it because it does multiple wounds per hit, or you just kill a whole bunch of knights in a nice long row, and you soften up that enemy knight unit before it charges you. Cannons are pretty much an auto include if you're playing Empire because it really helps soften up enemy units that we otherwise have a hard time killing because our guys just aren't that good. Mortar is kind of like a stone thrower, which is like a catapult, except it fires an explosive shell. It does a large blast. It's good for killing light, very light infantry. You can knock out a whole bunch of stuff with a good shot. And I don't know. I really like this one. Again, it's one I feel is an auto include in most armies if you're just playing a take all comers list. But if you're shooting at anything with good armor like dwarves and chaos warriors, don't bring this thing. It's just not that great. They tend to have higher toughness, meaning you're wounding on like fives or worse, and they have enough armor that even though you're like -1 armor or something, it's really not that big a deal for them. And last we got flagellants. These are crazy guys. These are like the doomsday people, the end is nigh, wave their sign, crazy people that we see um, in movies and stuff. And these guys are the same thing. They think the world's going to come to an end, so they want to go and fight for Sigmar. And they have flails and they're unbreakable. That's their real thing, meaning that you have to kill every single one of them in combat before they don't run away. They just die. The reason you would take these guys is for that. Get them into combat with a good unit. All they need to do is live long enough for you to position yourself for a charge the next turn. If they're still holding when it's your turn to charge, or held for a turn or 2 or 3 turns, and the enemy couldn't move, that's what you want. You want to get them to hold something so that you can charge it in the flank or the rear and really break that unit. And it doesn't matter how good the enemy is, unless they can do a ridiculous number of attacks. It really doesn't matter because even one left will block that unit from reacting the next turn. Rare choices: Hellblaster Volley Gun, Hellstorm Rocket Battery. These are very similar to the other ones, except that they are more dangerous to both the enemy and you. War machines can blow up. We roll a die called the misfire die. 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10 is what can roll. So basically, if you roll 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's sort of double. But that's to do with like strength and like how far something might move. But the misfire one, that's the one that could blow up your weapon. If you roll in the misfire chart and you roll a one, or sorry, you roll a misfire on the die, and then you go to the chart. There's usually anywhere from 3 to 6 options as to what will happen, and you randomly get one by rolling. If the weapon explodes, it just dies. It's gone. It doesn't have any wounds left. It could have full wounds. It's just gone. There's no way to save it. The cannon just explodes. And the Hellblaster Volley Gun and the Hellstorm Rocket Battery, both of these roll a lot of artillery dies, meaning they can get a lot of shots, they can do a lot of damage, but they are more likely to roll a misfire and explode. So keep that in mind. These are high risk, high reward weapons. And then we got a steam tank. It's literally a tank. There's a picture of it. It's steam engine tank. It shoots a cannon. It shoots a flame cannon. It's got a guy with a gun up on the roof. It's got crazy good armor at like 1+, like knights. And it basically will cost you the same as 10 knights if the points stay relatively similar. This should be in the game because it was made by a dude even before this period. So the Empire's had these for a while. Sometimes the lore will tell you that they have like 12 of them, and like half of those are like destroyed or like lost. And other times they tell you that the Imperials are just making these tanks all the time because they know how. I don't know which is true. They were basically made by Fantasy's version of Michelangelo, or sorry, Leonardo da Vinci, and He supposedly died with the secret, and that's sort of how I thought it was for many years until it just seems like in the lore now they're everywhere, and the Empire must have figured out how to reverse engineer and make their own because it just feels like they're all over the place in the lore even by the end of it. Uh, and then there's some magic chariots. They are like the War Altar, except they're focused on College of Magic lores. One of them does like kind of like a bolt thrower. It's like a magic war machine. It's good at killing heavy infantry, two or three of them usually. It's good at doing some damage to a monster, and it's magic, so it's got some cool stuff. Also, it gives you a power die for your magic phase, which I mean that doesn't exist anymore. We'll see how magic works. And then it gives your guys that are nearby a 6+ ward save. That's a save that can never be made worse. They always will have at least a 6+. That's pretty handy. The other one, the Celestial Hurricanum, the first one's called the Luminarch of Hysh. It looks like a bunch of like mirrors or lenses that are all focused on the roof. The Celestial Hurricanum looks like a solar system model that's on the roof, and this thing does a random spell that does damage to the enemy every turn. It gives you an extra dispel die. Sorry, no, this one gives you a power die. The other one gives you a dispel die. Sorry. It gives you an extra power die for casting magic, and also nearby troops get +1 to hit. Massive. If you can charge in some knights, there's a good chance they're hitting most things on a 3, because most things have a 3 weapon skill, and they have a 4 weapon skill on knights. If this thing follows in behind and stays out of combat but stays in range, then those knights are now getting +1, meaning they're hitting on 2s. It's a really powerful bonus, especially if you combine it with like warrior priests who give you re-rolls to hit. It's just really, really cool. I also just don't think they're going to be in the game because, again, they're tied to colleges of magic that don't exist. Again, major retcons or a bunch of really big stretches of like why some random hedge wizard or somebody invented this before. And I don't know. I just don't think it makes sense. It makes more sense to leave them in Age of Sigmar now, at least until we get colleges of magic. Now, starting Empire. If you want to start these guys, it is possible, but it's going to be kind of tough. The Empire has lost a lot of their range, basically all of it, in the last few months because Cities of Sigmar used to rely heavily on these guys. Cities of Sigmar have replaced this with the new human infantry. The Dark Elves, some of the dwarves, they're still part of the Cities of Sigmar, but the human stuff's pretty much all gone. All that's left is what is left? I wrote it down somewhere. Oh yeah, the wizards are still there. Magic chariots are still there. Flagellants are still there, and the steam tank. Everything else is gone. It's off being repackaged for the old world, so you cannot buy it brand new right now. The only way that you'll be able to find it brand new is go to private sellers who have a box on hand, or go find a store that has some in stock. They will exist, although I think the Games Workshop stores send out of production stuff back to be destroyed, or at least in this case, repackaged. So this is not going to be the easiest army to start right now. Up until 5-6 months ago, it actually was really easy to start Empire. Like all of these armies that I'm going to talk about, I do suggest, if you can afford it, get one of the old rule books because it's good for a reference in terms of lore and painting and stuff. And it might even have, especially if it's like 6th edition, those 6th edition books usually had a strategy section of how to play the army really well. And the Empire really didn't change that much. I don't think it's going to change much here. So it might be worth having, just to have on hand. And again, they're nice books to have in general. Um, Anyways, getting stuff, like I've already said, independent stores. And if you can't do that, go to used. This one here, I'm gonna give a little bit of a warning. If you're buying used Warhammer Fantasy right now, prices are very high. Um, Everybody knows this is coming. There might be the odd guy who just like opens his closet or his attic and is like, "Hey, Warhammer! I remember this game. I played this when I was a wee lad, and I don't play it anymore, so I'll just put it on Kijiji for $50." and they don't know that it's worth maybe like $1,000 because it's just this huge army that they collected 20 years ago. And to them, it's just an old pile of toys. Who knows what it's for? They don't do any research and they sell it for cheap. We see stories. People get lucky. They get these amazing scores. Um, if you get one of those, you're lucky. Most likely, you're going to be dealing with people who know this game is coming, who know people are desperate to start armies, and they're going to charge a premium right now. So shop around. Do not rush and buy the first thing you see. And just understand there's a good chance prices are going to drop very significantly in the coming weeks and months. Um, you'll see resellers who are right now trying to sell for the best value everything they have left. But also, you're going to see resellers panic sell the closer we get to release, I think, because they're going to know that the value is going to drop off. And in some cases, it might be worth less than they spent to invest in buying those models. And they might just try to sell it at a, you know, break even point or a very minor profit or a very minor sale, around December, January. So if you want to wait for a better price, I do think that's possible. But otherwise, yeah, check Facebook, check eBay. You might get lucky. You might find somebody with a good deal who either, and I'm not saying take advantage of people who don't know what they have. If they have it for like $20, I don't know. I personally would tell them, hey, it's worth a lot more than that. But if they're selling it for like $100, $150, that's sort of in the range of what I think a used army is worth anyway. So I don't feel bad usually, unless it's like again a massive army, and then I might mention to them, hey, this is actually, this is worth a lot more than that. You should be careful, unless you don't need the money. But I think everybody right now needs the money. Uh, yeah, if you see something though that you like, there's no reason not to buy used. You'll get your best value probably here, unless you go with printing. 3D printing is one of those things that's contentious. A lot of people love it. A lot of people hate it. Some people won't play with you if you have a printed army, and those people I like to call them assholes. Um, no, I mean not really. Like they're not that bad in some senses. I do get it. Um, you have your nicely painted official stuff, and then somebody shows up with something that's like kind of official looking. It just looks like a bootleg. If you're really into the aesthetic part of Warhammer, I actually do understand. I would not want to play with the Hello Kitty Space Marine army that used to be, kicking around the internet 20 years ago. That would be one of those things I'd see it one time and go, haha, that's funny. And then I would not want to play with that because I have a seriously painted army and you brought Hello Kitty dreadnoughts. So, I mean, I can understand to an extent. But when it comes to the Empire, Highland Miniatures and several others, but I'm going to focus on Highland Miniatures here, they sell basically perfect representations of the Empire because the Empire is based on historical armies. It is not some sort of crazy fantasy army where they invented anything. That picture of this great swordsman, that's a Zweihander. That's a two-handed swordsman in Germany. 500 years ago. He really would look pretty much the same. Just take all the random skulls off his stuff. There's a lot of skulls there, and that's all that they're missing in the historical stuff. And Highland Miniatures copied the same style, but they didn't steal from GW. They stole from history. So I feel like that's sort of like, you know, it's an okay one. When some people might complain about stolen IP, you can't steal IP that was essentially stolen to begin with from history. And anyways, Highland Miniatures, Sunland Empire of the Sun. These guys are Empire. Pretty much anything you need is going to be there. They're really nice. They print really well if you have a good printer and you know how to use it. And you can buy these guys online, although I do not suggest buying printed minis in most cases because I find almost always the price is actually really no better than just buying a GW kit. And when you do consider that players might not play with you, and more importantly, stores might not let you in. And this one I never argue with them. The stores have a right to say no because the stores make money when we buy stuff. If you show up and you give them $5 for a table, if they even charge $5 for a table, and then you play with your printed army that you've paid nothing to them for, and then everybody around you goes, "Oh wow, that's cool! I can just print my armies." I do understand where their concern comes from. If you're gonna spend like $50 on 10 guys, I would definitely suggest just buying Warhammer from Games Workshop. But if you can get these guys at a good price, Highland Miniatures is awesome. Uh, Also, if you're looking for Empire models outside the box, you can go for historical models, but they're going to be small unless, again, you print them where you can buy historical miniatures people have made, and then you just rescale in your slicing software. And that one there, you can basically you can make them the same size as Warhammer models, essentially, is what I'm getting at. And because Empire models are just historical models for the most part, you really aren't going to be like again looking out of place. It'll look like an Empire army, and it'll just be as long as you're not playing against people who refuse to play you. There really shouldn't be an issue because you're not going to ruin the aesthetic. Starter Force. This is just a suggestion force. It's 1,000 points of 8th edition, roughly. I don't think I have any upgrades on here. Now, you know what? I think I do have upgrades on here, but we'll you'll see what I get at here. It's about 1,000 points. Um, and I've played 3 editions of Empire plus some other versions of like Warhammer Fantasy, like Ninth Age. I'm pretty solidly versed in how to play Empire, and this is a pretty good 1,000 point list because it gives you a good mix and a good place to start from to expand the army. So you need a captain. This guy can later on become a general, but a captain is a good start because he's going to be your general. Then you need a wizard. This is going to be your guy that casts spells. And okay, I wrote mage. I meant to write warrior priest. I don't know what happened. So a captain, a wizard, and a warrior priest. I will do something in the video to fix that. Um, some sort of edit. And then you have a very good mix of characters to lead your army with. After that, 25 to 30 halberdiers. Halberdiers I chose because they have a good, consistent +1 strength, and they'll probably have an AP bonus. Um, they're the guys that will do consistent damage. Spearmen have a lot of attacks and are good against very light infantry. Halberdiers are less attacks, but still better than the spearmen when it comes to doing damage. Whether that's because they hurt the weak stuff even better, or because they can just like actually hurt something that's tougher that the spearmen have a hard time wounding. Then I put in 10 handgunners as a detachment. You can run them on their own, but as a detachment they're pretty solid. It's just some shooting. It's good strength, it's good AP, and it's a good representation of what an Empire army should look like. Then I've got 5 to 10 knights, whatever you can get your hands on. Knights are going to be your heavy hitters. You're going to hold with halberdiers, but you're going to win with knights. Finally, pistoliers and a cannon. Pistoliers because, again, I've told you before, they're fast. They can get around and give you more options. And as I've said before, movement wins the game. These guys here will give you movement options the enemy might not have. They might not be able to deal with these guys. So there's a few ways to use them, and they're just a really nice model, or a nice unit to have. And the cannon, because as I've said, the cannons, it's a force equalizer. If this guy at 1,000 points brings a giant, giant's not the best monster, but the giant, you're gonna have a hard time hurting it. With a cannon, you can just kill it outright. And if they take something better, like an Arachnarok spider, or if they somehow fit a dragon or a griffin, those are all things that you really don't want to fight with spears and halberds and handguns. So you shoot it with a cannon. Um, that's my suggestion for 1,000 points if you want to have somewhere to start. I mean, obviously get the things you want that you think look cool, but that's a good place to kick off from, and it expands very well. Playing the Empire, I've said this already. The troops are not that great, but we have good leadership buffs. We have detachments, and these things make our troops good. They become very expensive, but you can rely on troops that have decent leadership and have a bunch of rerolls or whatever, a lot more than you can rely on a cheaper unit that doesn't have those bonuses because of characters, or a cheaper unit that doesn't have detachments to help with charges or to help with shooting. So it's one of those things that You're going to pay a lot, and you probably might not actually have more than one block of troops because of this. You might rely on some cavalry instead, or even some smaller blocks just to round out your force. But one big solid parent and detachment setup is probably worth the hundreds of points investment, just because of how much better it makes them. You're also going to want to use your parent units to hold things in place while the detachments are in the flank. That's going to take away rank bonuses if that still works that way. It's also going to mean that that unit is not moving around. You're holding them in place, again, maybe with a buff to leadership so you don't run away. Um, and if you're killing stuff while you're there, even better. But then your knights can get in for a rear or a flank charge on the other side. And again, that's how you're going to break them. Like I said, the infantry hold in a fight, but the knights win in a fight. So if the knights get into a flank, you will win, especially if they're already held um, in the front by your infantry. Um, and then, even though our shooting is expensive, cannons can be a lot of points. Handgunners are a lot of points per model, but it's a solid way to do damage before the enemy gets to you. And I think it's important to keep in mind that every model from the enemy, especially bigger stuff that does not get into combat, that's more of your men that are going to survive. If you can kill the monsters, if you can kill the trolls, if you can kill the knights before they get to combat, big chunks of their points are gone. And now they're going to rely on the infantry, which are going to often be, lower quality to win the fight, because the thing that they were actually thinking was going to do it is no longer there because you shot it off the table. Um, I will warn you, if there was one army I consistently heard complaints about, um, it was Empire because of cannons. Dwarves, same thing. But yeah, cannons definitely are a weapon that people complained about a lot because of their potential to outright kill big monsters and single characters. You know, you might have a character on a dragon. If the cannonball goes well, I mean, you're not just killing the dragon; you might kill the character. Depending on the addition and how things work. So it's something to consider. Painting, I've already mentioned this, but I just wanted to throw this map in. Basically, pick the one that you like in terms of colors, pick the one you like in terms of lore, and just paint. I do think we're going to see armies that are like one set of colors, sort of like we saw in those Bretonian teasers, just red and black. I think they're going to go for that because it makes it less daunting for new painters or people who just don't want to paint a lot of stuff in general. But um, you can really make a very colorful army by mixing all these different factions together. It'll just come down to how it works on the tabletop. In the period of the Three Emperors, there were some sub faction alliances. That might be how we have to sort of play it. I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes. But again, lots of color options if you'd like to have bright infantry. And yeah, again, there's lots of resources online, or you can buy one of the books. And you can even look for things like Marienburg, which is another human city that's very nearby. It's like somewhere over here, and they're not Empire, but they are basically an Empire army. Even in 6th edition, they were a special list in the back of the book that you could try to field. So yeah, Empire. This is an army I've always liked. I feel that if you're looking for an army that's going to give you a lot of different gameplay mechanics to play around with, the Empire's great. Um, they are going to, give you infantry. They're going to give you shooting. They're going to give you war machines. There are monsters. There's cavalry. Um, there's light infantry. There's heavy infantry. Light cavalry. Heavy cavalry. There's machines. I mean, this basically has it all. Um, and while I've said many times, none of this is the best stuff in the game, it's all good stuff for the most part. Like, it's not going to win you battles, a lot of it, but it's going to like do its job against comparable units. As long as you don't dream big and send your your spearmen into the Chaos Warriors. It's not like you're going to be in positions every single matchup where, you know, you're just outclassed in every single way. And with the right buffs and synergies, you're going to be okay. Again, this is also going to appeal to to historical players and anybody who likes cinematic armies. Think of cavalry charges in movies. Think of gun lines in movies. Really memorable scenes, basically, in a lot of the best um, fantasy and historical films. And the Empire delivers that because it does them all. Any army can be cinematic, but this is probably the most cinematic because of the variety that it gives you. Anything you can think of and imagine from a film or from a novel, a video game, you can basically do it with this army better than any other army can do it, maybe, or at least, in terms of the variety, it's better. Maybe Bretonia does better nightly charges, but they don't have very good, like, cinematic infantry. They don't have cinematic war machines, things like that. So the Empire's got it all. And yeah, also if you're just into lore, like I've said, these guys are central. A lot of books that might not be about the Empire specifically take place in the Empire, or the Empire shows up, or the Empire is just like kind of in the background in some way, whether it's one character in the Bretonian book who's just there. The Empire is just always around. They're just part of the setting, I think, and just it's one thing that if you like lore that matches your army, the Empire might be a good choice for you. Anyways, I don't know how long this is now. I've not been keeping track of time. I'm going to stop it here. So if you have any thoughts or comments, definitely leave them down below. Um, I definitely would look forward to feedback about what I've done here because I do have 8 more of these to do. The Chaos one's pretty much ready to go. But I do want to make sure I make good um, tweaks if this one here doesn't go as well as you feel it could have. Tell me what I did wrong and what I could do better. I totally love to hear that stuff so that I can always improve what I'm working on. So yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. Leave those comments or thoughts down below and have a great day. Thank you very much.